This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
Good morning and welcome to Loose on the Lead. Seth Merrill from Equidaily.com live in the studio. Steve Bick from At the Races on Sirius and XM Radio. He is on assignment, so to speak. Was down at the Wood Memorial yesterday enjoying a day of racing, a really nice day of stakes action at Aqueduct yesterday. We have him via phone. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Seth.
And we'll talk specifically about the races in a few moments, but just give us a little overview of what the day was like down at Aqueduct yesterday.
You want your famous boots on the ground report?
Yes, there you go.
Well, it was a lovely day. It was sunny. It was warm, until fairly late in the afternoon. When the sun dips down, it starts to cool off. But terrific crowd, probably 12 to 14,000 on hand, which makes for a great atmosphere. And then the racing was just great all around. Other than the delay on turf. Getting turf going. Other than that, it was marvelous. Just a win-win.
And I will say, really, a couple of nice races, racing weekends in America. There was some foreign action as well, both last weekend and this weekend. But Gulfstream announced that they set a Florida Derby Day handle mark last weekend. I read that Santa Anita yesterday, 35,000 people. You're reporting a nice day down at Aqueduct. So as I say, a couple of nice weekends of racing in America.
No doubt about it. And, it just flies in the face of, all the negative reports. How about Keeneland, too, on Friday, opening day? The college kids coming out in the face of not such a great weather day. And, of course, they'll have, 2 terrific weeks here unfolding as spring, really kind of rolls in finally. And, I don't see how anybody has anything negative to say. They find ways to come up with negatives, but if you're actually paying attention or if you really care about the sport, you're enjoying what is shaping up as a tremendous year in all the divisions.
Yeah, it really is. So far, so good. And as you say, all the divisions seem like they're shaping up to be very competitive and fun this year. And again, we'll talk specifically about some of that stakes action at Aqueduct in a few moments. Now let's get to some of the news from the past week. And one of the big news stories ties in directly to our discussion last week. You were talking Keeneland reaching out for the Breeders' Cup potentially, and you said that portends for the other shoe getting ready to drop as far as Polytrack out, dirt in, and within probably, 48 hours, no more than 72 hours after you said that, Keeneland comes out with a press release and an announcement. They're going to replace their Polytrack. By the time the fall meet in 2014 kicks off, they will be back to dirt. The press release described it as a state-of-the-art dirt track. There has been all kinds of mixed reaction from the racing industry. Some folks saying if they're going back to dirt, don't have it be the dirt that they had before, because that certainly, as far as bettors and the way things played out, that wasn't preferable. And some of the horsemen have also said horses would run down and whatnot. But it seems like Keeneland going to base things over the dirt over the drainage system that the Polytrack system is based on, and so they're hoping the drainage is better. And again, they're saying a state-of-the-art dirt track. We'll see how that works out. But it was a very, very notable announcement from Keeneland this week.
There's no doubt, and you knew that this was going to create a bit of a firestorm, and of course, it comes in coordination, inadvertently, with the release last week of the equine injury database numbers. And so, of course, people are taking those numbers and they're trying to take raw data and force a conversation that this decision and the continued application of racing on dirt tracks is a death knell for horses everywhere, a preposterous response in the New York Times to this the other day. It is so biased, and every conversation, it seems, of late, and I suppose the social media landscape lends to this, with just a cacophony of opinions in every direction. But the reality is, you take for instance, the Keeneland Poly numbers the last 5 years, which is 11,000 starts and 11 equine fatalities. Compare that to Saratoga, the same 5 years on the dirt track, 8,000 starts, 8 deaths. I'm not a statistician, but that sounds like the exact same number of incidents per 1,000 starts. So the pretending that a bunch of synthetic racetracks at places like Keeneland, Woodbine, Del Mar, etc., Arlington, Keeneland, and you're comparing those statistics cumulatively to places that include Mountaineer, Fairmount, Charlestown, Beulah, Turf Paradise, the California Fair Circuit, you're comparing a bunch of A and B tracks to the widespread dirt landscape. It's not apples to apples. So without further details from Dr. Parkin, the epidemiologist that is going to go through the database numbers, and they're only for the last 5 years, so you don't even know what the statistics are long term. It's just ridiculous to make this presentation that racing doesn't care. Keeneland doesn't care how many horses die. I mean, it's just preposterous the way this whole discussion is framed.
Yeah, and as you said, Joe Drape in the New York Times picked right up on it. And I should note to people, that was certainly not a news reporting piece. That was a commentary, and that was opinion. And that's part of my problem with what Drape does. I don't think it was clearly labeled as such, but it was. Some of the reactions, Blood Horse had a nice article where they reached out to folks. Nick Zito says, hallelujah. I was very vocal on criticizing the installation of the poly track. Charlie Lopresti says he's concerned about it and not really in favor of it. But then he adds, I can tell you one thing, Keeneland never does anything halfway, so whatever they do will be top quality. I was interested, Barry Irwin from Team Valor, he was quoted as saying, Polytrack was a noble and courageous experiment by Keeneland, but I'm glad to know that dirt will return. So again, there was certainly some mixed reaction out there. And again, coming on the heels of that injury database press release from a week and a half or so ago, it was kind of interesting, and folks did tie it in. But we talked last week, making these comparisons to dirt and poly. As you say, the poly tracks, the synthetic tracks, are typically higher-end tracks, but then, as I've always said, too, they're also newer tracks, and I think that skews the numbers as well. Yep. So I agree completely with your thoughts there.
Well, and you talk about the reaction, and obviously people who have had success, Mark Cassidy and Graham Motion was a little more than a little missed by this, and I think Graham, you look at the outfits and you look at the kinds of horses that certain trainers notably train and the kind of owners they have, and if it skews in that direction, Turf and the poly, well, sure, they're going to be frustrated. I do find it funny, Seth, as a side note, mentioning Graham Motion, and I had this discussion with him yesterday. It's really funny that the supposed equine safety advocates, they quickly were immediately trumpeting Graham's comments about the synthetic surfaces. They are so concerned about equine safety, but yet they don't quote Graham when he explains his support for LASIK. They use Graham when they want to talk about equine safety on the synthetics, but they conveniently leave out his position as pro-LASIK for the safety and well-being of horses. So they're for equine well-being in one camp, and then in another discussion, they obviously aren't for equine safety and well-being because they're against the use of LASIK. So it's kind of funny. Everybody's got their favorite prize bull to trot out when the occasion arrives.
Yeah, I will say that selectivity is not limited to Graham Motion. I'm always amazed when I read these articles and they pick out the things that really play into their point of view and don't look at the whole broad picture very often with a lot of these guys. I just wanted to mention one more quote from that Blood Horse article. It's interesting because it was from Rosie Napravnik, a jockey, and obviously jockeys are all about safety of the horses because if a horse breaks down, they go down. But Rosie Napravnik says, I have always preferred dirt over poly, and only in the last couple of years have I had much experience riding over the poly, mostly at Keeneland. But she, as a jockey, prefers dirt, so that was interesting as well.
Well, there's a reason for that, Seth. What happens is when jocks hit the ground on dirt, much like horse's hooves, the jock will bounce and slide. And on the poly, they hit hard and they stick. And the concussion is much more pronounced for the jock as well on the synthetic surface. And that's why the jocks have not been all that keen on it as well. So there's, look, I'll be selective and quote Barry Irwin. The thing has been a noble experience. I know that I've been very critical of Keeneland, who led the industry into this with a whole bunch of purported benefits. It wasn't going to need any maintenance, and it was going to be a panacea, and it wasn't on any of those fronts. And so I think for the good of everybody in terms of betting, for instance, I mean, certainly people have adjusted to certain synthetic tracks, but it didn't help the industry from a handle standpoint. And that is the business part of our sport. And the other thing about this, Seth, is in terms of what we run on as an industry in this country and the breeding side of things. I mean, this has been bad for Keeneland's business overall, and they are a business concern. I know they're nonprofit, but they have a sales organization, and they're trying to present the best quality racing that they can. And all of their signature events have eroded in quality. The Spinster, the Ashland, the Bluegrass, they've all become second-tier races. And even though they've retained their Grade 1s, let's be honest, they were basically Grade 3 turf races disguised as Grade 1 main track races. So they've got their interest to look out for, and you can understand it from that standpoint.
And I'll also toss in, before we move on, over this week, some of the pundits were weighing in on the synthetics in Dubai in the aftermath of the Dubai World Cup. And the one that was most notable to me, Alan Aiken, who writes about Hong Kong racing mostly in the South China Morning Post. He commented, gave his afterthoughts on the Dubai World Cup, and obviously there was some Hong Kong connections there. That's why he was weighing in. But in the middle of his article, he says, Tapeta, like every other artificial surface, seems to have passed through the usual phases. Gift from God, still settling in, maintenance issues, and finally discredited goat track. So it's not just Keeneland, it's global. The synthetic surface revolution is under a little bit of fire, whether you agree or not. And I've said, I think there's a place for synthetic tracks, but I have no argument with Keeneland going back to dirt, and the game plan there is they'll be back to dirt in the fall. Let's move on. Notable New York news, NYRA paid back the advance from getting the $25 million advance. I know you had some thoughts there as well.
Oh, I've got some thoughts here, all right. And it's amazing so far how little coverage. And granted, I was downstate for Wood Memorial, so I haven't had a chance to review all the media. But this is a story that has stuck in my craw from day one. And this money was part of the franchise agreement. It was because the state had more or less held hostage the Aqueduct Slots Parlor for almost a decade. The $25 million then is subsequently portrayed in the New York Post and the Daily News by the embarrassing James O'Dotto and the reprehensible Times Union as a bailout. So I'm wondering, are all of these quarters, are all of these editorial boards who were basically marionettes for Albany, are they going to issue corrections now that this loan is paid off? Are they basically going to say, we're sorry that for the last 4 years we've characterized this money as a bailout, when in fact it was a completely legal and mandated part of the franchise agreement? But in an effort to discredit NYRA and to turn public opinion against racing in this state, for whatever the motivations were for the newspapers and the media outlets in and around New York Metro and here upstate, they should be absolutely excoriated for this, just embarrassing treatment. And I really want to see this thing trumpeted the way they were advertising a bailout. It's really disgusting. And the fact that they haven't been called out by anybody just tells you that they've gotten away with it.
Well, and that's part of my problem. I just don't think the mainstream sports media is keyed into horse racing enough to be on top of these things. I said it a couple of weeks ago after the PETA video, and I think it will double or triple up on this. I would expect we won't hear anything about this is probably the game plan. And as you say, that is certainly unfortunate. Just before we go to the break, want to give you a chance to comment. Trainer Dickie Smalls passes away, age 68. Dickie Smalls, trainer of 94 Breeders' Cup Classic winner Concern. He was also the trainer of Broad Brush, Caesar's Wish, diagnosed with cancer a couple of years back. And again, at 68, leaves us too young.
Well, this has not been a good year for either Mid-Atlantic. Of course, the Tom Voss already gone. The Dominic Galuccio shocking passing. It's been a very rough situation. It seems for some of the top horsemen in the Northeast anyway. And Dickie Small was a guy that is just so respected and beloved, and particularly in the Mid-Atlantic. He started so many careers, Seth. Jockeys, I mean, you're going to see stories about Forrest Boyce and from, of course, Rosina Pravnik and lots of other young riders that he educated and gave a leg up to and helped them start their careers. He was an absolute brilliant horseman with any kind of horse. You mentioned Caesar's Wish. That's one of his absolute favorites. I had him tell stories about Broad Brush. The most entertaining, of course, is that Broad Brush absolutely loved going in the van. And whenever he wouldn't ship and didn't run well, Dickie Small would have to put him in the trailer and get into the carriage and then drive the horse around for a couple of hours to make him think that he was going to go and he was shipping, because Broad Brush just loved to stick his head out like a collie and just adored getting in the van. And Dickie used to tell you, Dickie Small is one of those guys that would tell these kinds of stories and would chuckle to himself so often. And I'm so proud that I was able to have conversations with him on At the Races. And like everybody else, going to just absolutely miss him, taken way too soon. And another brilliant horseman taken from the landscape. He was a Green Beret paratrooper that served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. I mean, he was as tough as they came and as gentle as you'd want a man to be. He was just an exceptional individual, and racing is diminished greatly by his passing.
Yeah, it's sad. Dickie Smalls passes away at age 68. All right, Steve, we'll take our break. When we come back, we'll take a look at some of the racing yesterday and get some of your thoughts on the big stakes action, of course, highlighted by both of the 3-year-old races, the Wood Memorial and Santa Anita Derby. All of that right after this.
Hey race fans, head down to the all-new Clubhouse Racebook. With live horse racing on more than 250 flat-screen TVs, state-of-the-art wagering terminals, and amazing Vegas-style atmosphere. The Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue, Albany.
Go Zephyr kicking clear, and Go Zephyr is pulling away impressively.
Hysterical Lady, Ginger Punch to win it.
And it's Wilco in front, and he's going to pull off a huge upset here.
But it's Round Pond going on to take the distaff.
Awesome again. Sire of 10 Grade 1 winners, 4 Breeders' Cup champions, and 4 multimillionaires, standing at Adena Springs.
It's more than just a sports bar. It's Stadium Cafe. Located at 389 Broadway in Saratoga, it's the place to be for great times and great food. Their menu features everything from gourmet entrees to your favorite wraps and sandwiches. Or maybe you just want to grab a beer and catch the game. So what can be better than that? How about 2 Stadium Cafes? There's also the Westside Stadium, right up the road at 112 Congress Street. Same great menu, same great service. Whether you're hanging at the bar or just relaxing outside on their spacious covered patio, you'll always leave knowing you'll be back again.
We love, above all, the staff. We love Dave Harmon, and the food is fantastic.
Not 1, but 2. 112 Congress Street, 389 Broadway. Guaranteed to be a home run.
Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTV.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTV.com. Log on today.
Welcome back to Loose on the Lead. Seth Merrow and Steve Bick. Seth Merrow in the studio. Steve Bick live via phone. He was down at Aqueduct yesterday for the Wood Memorial and the nice undercard of stakes races. And Steve, let's get right into it. Let's kick off and take them in order here. The Bayshore for 3-year-olds going 7. So these are the sprinter side of the 3-year-old division. And we're going to watch the stretch run here. It will be number 4, Coup de Gras, getting it done for Chad Brown and Fox Hill Farm. Coup de Gras certainly first couple of starts of the career showed some promise and then threw in a complete dud in the Holy Bull, but comes back to validate that early promise yesterday, getting up by just a nose over Oliver Zip. And Oliver Zip, a horse that also has shown some talent, having won the Freddie Capicella last time out. So nice stretch duel here. Kobe's back, shipping in from Southern California, winds up 3rd. The Admiral also coming in from Southern California. This one for Bob Baffert winds up 4th. But again, Coup de Gras validates that early promise he showed in the career.
Well, the key to this, of course, was all these horses turning back from their tries. There was some cheapish style speed that was going to be a part of this, and then you were looking at horses like Kobe's back and Coup de Gras coming on the turn back. And, Coup de Gras, good job. Congratulations to Chad Brown and to Rick Porter. Obviously, Kobe's back's a bad start, and, I can understand the way the thing unfolded. He certainly put in a nice run, maybe with a better start and from a better stalking position, he probably wins. But the good news is, that the Woody Stevens and the Amsterdam and the King's Bishop, the 3-year-old sprint division has sort of taken its time so far to identify itself. This race did not get a big figure, I think 89 buyer. So the sprinters as 3-year-olds, not as good right now as the route-going 3-year-olds, but they're finding themselves, and things bode well. Oliver Zip ran a tremendous race, I thought, to stay on and almost get up and stay through. But it's fun way to start the sprint sequence.
And what was your take on Favorite Tale? Because I kind of like that horse going in and showed some early punch, and I thought on the turn, maybe he's okay. And then he fades and disappointing 7th in the field of 8. But I'm just wondering if maybe his scenario this year, all 3 of the first starts were down at Parks, and I'm wondering if that partly wasn't due to the quarantine situation, and maybe his schedule was a little put off by that. I'm going to give him one more shot.
Well, we were talking on the show on Friday. Nick DeMaro brought up, some of those good sprinters from the Mid-Atlantic, like JJ's Lucky Train, horses like that. I think that was one of those horses that, when I mentioned, Loki's Vengeance too. Sort of a cheaper type that is probably at the level that they're going to be. And when you get horses like Kobe's back and Coup de Gras, when you get them post Derby prep season, when you get them returning to what they probably have the most aptitude for, which is one turning, those kinds are going to eclipse, the cheaper true sprinter type. So Oliver's Tail and definitely Oliver's Zip and Favorite Tail, Loki's Vengeance, they're nice horses. There'll be plenty of opportunities for them, maybe just a cut beneath. But, you never know. Some of those jump up and they win races like the Amsterdam and the Gallant Bob and so forth. So, that's a division sort of trying to find itself.
All right, let's move on. Speaking of divisions, the 3-year-old filly division, they went in the Gazelle Grade 2 for $300,000, going 1 1/8. We're going to look at a Pletcher Exacta here. Number 4, My Miss Sophia, over number 2, Got Lucky. Sweet Reason at the top of the stretch for Leah Giarmati, the number 3 horse. Kind of looks like she's going to make a move and then maybe flattens out a little bit and then just gets caught late by Got Lucky and loses the second place position. So it's My Miss Sophia, Got Lucky, and Sweet Reason. Again, Sweet Reason maybe disappoints a little bit. I know Andy Serling was saying on the pre-race prattle that he thought Sweet Reason might be a little bit better cutting back to one turn as the year progresses. We'll see how that works out. But My Miss Sophia, coming off a very big maiden breaker in the second career start down at Gulfstream, validates that now, winning the Grade 2 Gazelle yesterday.
Well, and that's the key to the story here. And undoubtedly, there was not going to be anybody to run with My Miss Sophia early. And, of course, we're going to have that same story for the Carter. I mean, if these horses get away with an early, with an early fraction and they get to relax on the backstretch, there's not going to be any reeling them in. She absolutely, I thought, more than validated. I mean, a lot of people love to go against the Fletcher horses coming out of Gulfstream. This is obviously a fast-developing type, and I thought that, she was in a more or less an almost a can't-lose situation based on the pace scenario yesterday, and then that's exactly the way it played out. But she was even better than I expected. 93 buyer for this, and so, frankly, all of these 3-year-old fillies, we'll talk maybe in a minute about Fashion Plate and Ria Antonia in the Santa Anita Oaks, but frankly, none of them are even close to untappable. I mean, there isn't a filly, 3-year-old filly in the country within 5 or 8 lengths of untappable.
And I know you're a voter in that NTRA poll. You said you've had untappable among your 3-year-olds, and she made the top 10 among all voters this past week in the NTRA poll, and so she is clearly the leader of that 3-year-old filly division, no question about it. But as you mentioned, those fractions, My Miss Sophia goes out 24 and change, 48 and change, 112 and change. At this level of racing, you're not going to reel in a front runner off of those kind of fractions.
No.
Speaking of fractions, the early pace in the Wood was not blazing, but the winner did come from off the pace. Number 2, Wicked Strong, will be the winner. The Grade 1, $1 million Wood Memorial, mile and an eighth. And, I was hoping for some definition as we went into these last 4 prep races, the 2 yesterday and the 2 more, the Bluegrass and the Arkansas Derby next week. I don't know how much definition the Wood Memorial lent to it, but I think given the potential pace scenario and the speed that's headed to the Kentucky Derby, Wicked Strong is going to be a nice addition for Jimmy Jerkins. Jimmy was interviewed after the race and noted that there was maybe some issues with those Gulfstream races that Wicked Strong was finally able to overcome. So number 4, Wicked Strong, comes from a little bit off the pace as we watch the stretch run and gets it done here. Number 8, Samrat, will run second. Social Inclusion, top of the stretch. I thought he was going to turn out and prove us all wrong and turn out to be something very, very special, but he winds up fading to, an okay third, just gets caught, and in that photo, getting caught, that points-wise, that could have cost him in here. And it also should be noted, Uncle Si, disappointing 5th, and his start actually played into the pace scenario in this race as well. Steve, are you there? Oh, we lost Steve. He was fading there momentarily, and we lost him. We will try to get him back. But again, I said it earlier on the Handicappers Report. To me, Wicked Strong, I sent in my Derby Media poll top 10. I did not add Wicked Strong to that. Points-wise, and that's what you have to start thinking about now, points-wise, Wicked Strong is a definite, certainly, and you have to start thinking about that. I just could not quite pull the trigger, but given the potential pace scenario, Wicked Strong is certainly an interesting addition to the race. Social Inclusion, Andy Beyer wrote that column a few days ago talking about throwing this one to the wolves by going into the Wood and then subsequently the Derby. Social Inclusion points-wise is very much a bubble horse now with only the 20 points. But if you read the post-race comments, it certainly looks like they're jumping into the Wood Memorial, or jumping into the Kentucky out of the Wood Memorial. So we'll see how that plays out, certainly. But again, he's a little bit of a bubble horse coming in. Just to give you an idea, the points right now, I'm just looking here. Social Inclusion is sitting at number 22 on the list with 20 points. So again, he needs some defections. I do believe we have Steve back now. Steve, your thoughts on the Wood?
Well, it's funny, getting into New York yesterday and basically talking to people, there was such a strong buzz on Wicked Strong. It was remarkable. And I suppose it was more than just the concept that this was going to have a spirited pace between the horses on the outside and a horse like Chivarelli for Eddie Keneally. It seemed like there was going to be at least 3 to 4 horses that were going to press pace. And so I guess that people, saw the concept that Wicked Strong would have a big pace set up to rally into. I was not nearly as bullish on him and really didn't know what to expect. I will say he looked spectacular. And this is one of those cases where it may just be a horse that's developing a little bit later. And Jimmy Jerkins certainly echoed that post-race, that he saw a huge difference once they got past the Fountain of Youth and the Holy Bull. And Jimmy was never at any point concerned that he didn't have the horse that he expected to have. And then as he was trying to make a decision between the Florida Derby and then the Wood Memorial, he realized that, let's get out of here. Let's come back to New York on a racetrack that he's already shown he was going to be a solid, he'd already had a solid established form on, and it worked out just beautifully. And I'll talk about 2 things, because Jimmy Jerkins in this spot and Centennial Farm, and then, of course, the new owner breeders in California with Artie Sherman, with California Chrome, the Calbred. This is about as great a pair of winners heading to Kentucky as you possibly could envision, especially in light of all of the negativity. You've got 2 consummate horsemen in Jerkins, and in terms of the Jerkins family, and Art Sherman, a guy who was an exercise rider for Swap, who worked for Rex Ellsworth, who's been training for 40 years, who's got his son working for him, Alan and Steve. It's perfect. And so the 2 of them, I think, come into this as, a front-end horse, a 107 buyer for California Chrome, 104 for Wicked Strong, absolutely a horse that is going to relish the full 10 furlongs of the Derby. Same thing with California Chrome. It looks like he's going to continue on beautifully. I thought that was the best part of the story. Are the horsemen involved? Not to take away from the big outfit, but this was really, I thought, a great Saturday for horsemanship. Manny Asperua, the 85-year-old trainer of Social Inclusion. Social Inclusion ran a wonderful race and was game as can be. Chivarelli, also a horse that's coming into his own. He was game as well, trying to set the pace and press the pace. And Sam Ratt, who to me looked like he was kind of backing up on the turn, he dug in and finished well. So everybody equipped themselves nicely, and even Uncle Si, who did not, they ran okay. He's going to get a chance, it looks like. I mean, is sort of down in that 17 to 25 range. We'll see how the whole field shakes out over the next 3.5 weeks for Derby. But in terms of the winner, just great, and great to see Centennial Farms. I think this is their first Grade 1 winner since Don Little's father, was tragically injured in a fall off a horse. So Centennial, one of the great venerable partnerships that's been around the game. Last year it was Dogwood with Palace Malice. Here's Centennial back at a high-profile victory. I just thought there was nothing but great stories for the most part all Saturday, and this was part of it.
All right, let's move on to the Carter, the stakes wrap-up for the day yesterday. Grade 1 event, $500,000, 7 furlongs, and you alluded to it earlier. It was a race that didn't necessarily, a sprint race at this level that didn't necessarily have a ton of early foot, and that's the way it played out. It was Dad's Caps and Strapping Groom kind of duking it out on the front end, but Dad's Caps takes it all the way around. Number 4, Dad's Caps, gets it done. Sierra Sky, coming off of that really nice race last time out in Southern California, winds up running second, clearly now runs third, but it is Dad's Caps wire to wire at 10-1.
Well, you see a Grade 1 sprint race with the caliber of horses that were involved here, and you see an opening quarter in the 24-second race. This was ridiculous. I mean, here's a horse in Dad's Cap who really has already proven that anything a step beyond 6 furlongs is a challenge to him. But you let him go in 23-2 and 46-2. Forget it. This was crazy, and you knew actually as they were approaching the turn. Here was Contreras sitting absolutely motionless on Dad's caps. I thought he's going to wire this field, and sure enough, the clever ride by Contreras too to take the heart out of everybody and spurt forward. Sahara Sky, who doesn't seem to be at the same level that he was last year coming into the Carter and into the Met Mile. But clearly now, Central Banker was a bit of a disappointment. Didn't like his race. He'll be better maybe second off the break here for Al Stahl and Klarovich. And, Golden Ticket ran an even race. This thing was over, though, as soon as 23-2 went up. I will tell you something. There's a story that's going to emerge. Rudy Rodriguez is about to get a suspension handed to him for all those sloppy medication overages, and it looks like he's going to be sat down for an extended period.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting also with the timing. You don't want to be in the crosshairs of the industry right now, and so we'll see how that plays out. Let's shift our attention before we let you go, Steve. Go out and look at Southern California, the 3-year-old girls and 3-year-old boys. First up, let's talk about the Santa Anita Derby. We got John White from Santa Anita coming on in a few minutes. We'll take a look at the races then, but I did want your thoughts, Santa Anita Derby. Off of that big effort last time, I wondered if California Chrome might have a bounce in him, but no bounce. I think this horse is turning out to be very, very special. Sat just off the early pace and then ran away from him in the stretch at 3-5. This may be a very, very special horse.
Well, it's a special story. Here is the owners, Steve Coburn and Marty Perry. They buy their first broodmare. This is the first horse they've ever bred. You can't make this stuff up. Shades of Hoop Jr. and Fred Hooper. Lucky Pulpit, the blue-collar Calbred sire, stands for, I think, $5,000, $7,500. It's just an amazing story. Art Sherman, as I mentioned, has been around the game for 6 decades, first as a rider and 4+ decades as a trainer. Northern Cal, of course, for a long period, Bay Meadows and Golden Gate. It's just a tremendous story. This is the people's horse out there. Received just a wild ovation and people going crazy. 30,000 plus at Santa Anita yesterday. Rick Hammerly, called me after, and Hammer said, it's absolutely the people's champ. And he was under a hold. I mean, Espinoza had him under a snug hold down the stretch. It's just great. I mean, he's not a big horse. He's sort of an in-between size. But he's really lean and it's got just a racy look to him. And I don't see why he is not going to be kind of that Bodemeister style heading into the Derby. I mean, he's got that same, fleet, relaxed status to him. On the backstretch, you could see that he didn't resent that Victor had a hold on him, but he clearly wanted to go. He was saying, you're not going fast enough to suit me. So he's got this high cruising speed and is going to be a very deserving favorite in the Kentucky Derby. It's just a great story. Just hope everything goes as smooth from here on into the first Saturday for Sherman and company with him. I will tell everybody, make sure you watch very carefully the gallop out on this and the after the wire. Opportunity had a very sneaky good performance in here. And this is a horse that is steadily improving. 9-2 yesterday for Baffert and Pegram and company, and he kept grinding it out. He's a horse that is going to have that sort of natural 24-2, 24-2, 24-2. Just lay out those kinds of quarters. He'll be sitting 6th and 8th in the Derby, just cruising along. He's a kind of a one-pace type, but that plays well come Kentucky Derby. And I would not be dismissive of Opportunity moving forward. I thought that was an excellent performance. Candy Boy might be a little stronger second off this layoff for Sadler. It looks like he's going to be okay to participate in the Derby. So we'll see what Stevens does, too, of course, because he'll be on Bayern next week at Arkansas. So we got to get through the Bluegrass. We got to get through Oaklawn. But things are starting to take shape, and this is a very solid 3-year-old crop set. I think we're in for a very good treat for this Triple Crown season.
And finally, the 3-year-old girls, Santa Anita Oaks yesterday, as we said, the clear leader of the division, untappable. But Fashion Plate, now undefeated since the move to real dirt, had a couple of starts earlier at Del Mar and Hollywood Park, but now 3 starts at Santa Anita, 3 for 3 at Santa Anita. Notable also, Ria Antonia in the first start in the Baffert barn, goes off the 6-5 favorite, runs second. Top of the stretch, looked like she may have a move on the winner, but Fashion Plate had a little bit of another gear there. So Fashion Plate, Ria Antonio, 1-2 in the Santa Anita Oaks.
Well, this was absolutely another race that it was defined by the pace. I mean, you're going to have these kinds of fillies going 23-3, 47-1, 111 at Santa Anita. Sorry, there's not going to be any reeling in of Fashion Plate. And basically, for Ria Antonia here to have been successful, I think she needed Fashion Plate to get engaged and to have a little bit more of a spirited pace in front of her. But I think Ron Paolucci is very satisfied with that performance. And, of course, Chris Dunn, who's a partner with Paolucci on the filly. Chris Dunn, local Saratoga guy, and they got to be very pleased. This was a very solid second off the layoff performance, the first performance under Baffert's eye. She certainly trained well coming into this. The two of them and some of the others, like Intune from last week at Gulfstream, and plus there's other fillies from yesterday, all will move forward to the Oaks. But they better show up with a howitzer in tow if they're going to beat Untappable.
Sounds good. All right, Steve, we appreciate the visit. Got to remind folks, next week, Palm Sunday, the week after that, Easter. So no programming here on the network, so we won't see it. We'll talk to you again in 3 weeks, however. Thanks for the visit, and travel home safely.
Seth, thanks. Is there broadcasting on Passover? Is there any cancellation of broadcast for Pesach?
There is no Palm Sunday or Easter Sunday racing, so New York, no racing whatsoever.
What about Passover? We got Passover. I guess we're going to. Passover's okay.
Yeah, you guys have to make the pitch for that.
Well, happy Easter to everybody and a good Passover. I will talk to everybody, obviously, on the radio, but we'll convene when we talk next. I'll be in Kentucky, and looking forward to what should be a great lead-up to the Derby.
Sounds good. All right, we'll talk to you then. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Dad.
We'll take our next break. When we come back, we'll be joined by John White from Santa Anita. We'll get some of his thoughts yesterday. Santa Anita Derby, Santa Anita Oaks, right after this.
May 3rd, it's the 140th running of the Kentucky Derby, and you can watch it at CapitalOTBBet.com. With live streaming and 3 easy-to-navigate wagering platforms, CapitalOTBBet.com is the most convenient way to wager on the Derby.
I didn't want to get just any degree after high school.
Horse racing has always been my passion.
I was already a lawyer.
When I was young, my dad took me to the races. The sound of the crowd. I still remember.
I'm 40, and I don't want to stay in a career I don't love.
I want to follow my passion.
Follow your passion at the University of Arizona Racetrack Industry Program.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night school, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night School in the Buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
The Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back. That's right. The 2014 Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back, and it's your chance to win thousands in cash and prizes, and a seat at the 2015 Handicapping Championship in Las Vegas. This month's contest is the Triple Threat on May 10th. So sign up today, online at capitalotb.com, or stop in at the Clubhouse Racebook.
I'm Jeff Carl. Join me Saturdays and Sundays at 9 for the Handicappers Report. We'll handicap the top tracks across the country and help you prepare for the weekend in racing. That's the Handicappers Report. Weekends at 9, only here on the OTB TV Network.
Welcome back to Loose on the Lead on this Sunday morning. Always happy to be joined by our friend John White, the paddock handicapper and morning line odds maker for Santa Anita. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Seth. How are you doing today?
Very good. And as I say, happy to have you on board after the big day out at Santa Anita. And before we talk about the races specifically, I just want a little overview because certainly the NBC broadcast, as they panned the apron, it looked like a big day, and subsequently I read the follow-up articles this morning, 35,000+ people out there. Give us a little recap of just what the day was like at Santa Anita.
Well, the weather was beautiful, and as you say, it was a big crowd, over 35,000, which in these days with simulcasting and in-home betting and computer betting and this and that, that's kind of a throwback to the days back before you had all those other options, and you had to be at the track to wager on the races. This is why I bristle when people say horse racing is a dying sport. Well, more eyes are watching racing, and more people are wagering on racing than ever before. So the sport, I think, is actually thriving, and an illustration of that would be what took place yesterday at the Great Race Place.
Yeah, there's no question the old fannies in the seat countdown is kind of anachronistic in this day of the internet and whatnot, and nobody ever really takes that into account when they give these write-ups of horse racing and the fan base. John, let's take a look now. Santa Anita Derby. I want your thoughts here because I came into the weekend saying I hope the weekend would give some definition to the 3-year-old crop. I'm not sure, in my mind, I'm not sure the Wood did. I think the Santa Anita Derby, though, helped things out, and I think as we progress during the week and see what the pundits have to say with their various Derby top 10s, it'll play out that way. We're going to watch the number 5 California Chrome get it done here as the 3-5 favorite. Number 3 Opportunity will run second for Bob Baffert. Number 6 Candy Boy winds up third. But John, coming into the race, I was a little concerned that there may be a bounce in store for California Chrome off the big effort last time, but we're watching the stretch run now. This is no bounce. This is, I think, a very special horse.
Well, actually, there was a bounce. He keeps bouncing right into the winner's circles where he's bouncing. The thing about California Chrome is he stepped up, and this is where I think the Thorograph numbers paint a better picture than the Beyer speed figures. Because if you go by the Thorograph numbers, California Chrome earned a 1 when he won the King Glorious. And with the Thoragraphs, the lower the better. And it's very unusual for a horse at that age to pair up numbers. Well, he did that in the California Cup Derby. He came back with another 1. And according to his buyers, he went 91.88. But then in the San Felipe, he jumped way up in the buyer department to a 108. But he basically ran close to the same race again. According to the Thoragraphs, he ran a half. So to me, he ran 3 consecutive, very similar performances, and I think he did the same thing yesterday. He got a 107 buyer yesterday, and of course I don't know what his Thorograph is at this time, but I'm going to guess it's going to be pretty much in that same ballpark that he got in the San Felipe. So that means 4 consecutive races. This reminds me of Snow Chief, a California bred in 1986 who took a 5-race winning streak into the Kentucky Derby, and he had shipped to Florida and won the Florida Derby, then came back to California and won the Santa Anita Derby by 6 lengths. Somewhat similar to California Chrome, who coasted in and won by 5 and a quarter lengths yesterday. But Snow Chief, who was sent off as the 2-1 favorite in a field of 16 in the Kentucky Derby, finished 11th. And trainer Mel Studi was so perplexed and disappointed that he was planning to skip the Preakness and just bring Snow Chief on home. And it was none other than winning trainer Charlie Whittingham, who sent out Ferdinand under Bill Shoemaker in a brilliant ride by Bill Shoemaker to win the Kentucky Derby, that talked Mel Studi. He told Mel, he said, forget the Derby. Any horse can have an off day, a bad race, what have you. He said, if I were you, I'd go on to the Preakness. And Snow Chief went on to the Preakness and did win the Preakness and spoiled the Triple Crown hopes of Ferdinand. So that's kind of the question I think that we're looking at with California Chrome, because I made the statement to a lot of people yesterday. If the same California Chrome shows up in the Santa Anita Derby that we saw in the King Glorious, the Cal Cup Derby, and the San Felipe, nobody's in his league. He'll win, and he'll win big. was in his league. And now the question is, will this same California Chrome show up in the Kentucky Derby, or will we get another Snow Chief?
Yeah, and I was just concerned and continue to be concerned with the way the pace scenario is shaping up. I'm on the panel on the ESPN Kentucky Derby poll. I sent in my top list the other day, and I have California Chrome. I moved that one up from kind of down in my top 10 to number 4. I think a lot of people are putting them right at the top now, and I just couldn't do that because of the pace scenario. There is a lot of early speed it's shaping up, but again, it looks like he could be very, very special. And part of that specialness, you were talking about some history along the Triple Crown Trail. I think part of the fun of this is tying in Art Sherman, who then draws a line back to Swap. So I think the story behind California Chrome is going to be a lot of fun for the next few weeks as well.
Well, it really is, because Art Sherman was the exercise rider for Swaps and actually rode on the train with Swaps from California to Kentucky and slept in the stall with Swaps. And of course, Swaps, not only most likely the greatest California bred ever, but one of the all-time great horses. He's a horse that really doesn't get the credit he probably deserves among the all-time greats. He set numerous world records. And interestingly, I was just looking at Swamps this morning, and as great as he was, he lost 3 of his first 5 races. So he wasn't like an instant success, somewhat similar to California Chrome, as California Chrome lost 4 of his first 6 races. But then Swaps, once he got past that, he reeled off 9 in a row. And, of course, that included the Santa Anita Derby. Now, Swaps only won the Santa Anita Derby by a half a length. But in those days, they raced horses more in between the Santa Anita Derby and the Kentucky Derby. He won an allowance race at Churchill Downs by a big margin very easily under Bill Shoemaker, and then defeated Nashua in the Kentucky Derby that year. You're right. Art Sherman is a very well-respected, very well-liked person. And interestingly, if he does pull this off and win the Kentucky Derby with California Chrome, he'll break Charlie Whittingham's record as the oldest Kentucky Derby winning trainer.
Yeah, and they had him on the NBC broadcast yesterday talking a little bit about some of those exact stories, and I think he's going to be a fun addition to the backstretch and the media side of it. John, let's look a little earlier on the card yesterday. Let's talk 3-year-old girls. I was on with my partner earlier, Steve Bick. He was on via phone because he was down at Aqueduct yesterday for the Wood Memorial. But we talked a little bit about the Gazelle, and he came out of that and said, but nobody in that division is better than Untappable. And I think she is the queen of the division right now. But I'd like to get your takeaway from the Santa Anita Oaks. We'll watch the stretch run. Number 1, Fashion Plate gets it done. She's now undefeated on traditional dirt. Rhea Antonia, the number 3 horse, first time out of the barn for Bob Baffert. I think it was an improvement over the 3-year-old debut down at Fairgrounds. And in fact, at the top of the stretch, I thought Rhea Antonia would be a real challenge. But Fashion Plate had a little more in the gas tank off of those early fractions. She gets it done. What do you think of the 3-year-old fillies out of the Oaks?
Well, actually, if they ever come up with this where you can bet on racing during the races, which there are spots in the world that offer that, with Gary Stevens, I feel like I could probably make millions, because that guy, I can tell pretty much, especially turning for home, if Gary Stevens is going to pull off one of those winning colors-ish rides. And he was just sitting like a statue on Fashion Plate, and the rider on Rhea Antonia was really urging. So even though Rhea Antonia looked like she was going to maybe give Fashion Plate a run for her money, at that point I thought the race was definitely over. And in fact, Fashion Plate galloped out way in front of Rhea Antonia. Rhea Antonia was never going to get by Fashion Plate in that race. Now, Fashion Plate only got an 87 buyer, which is very low. And I agree with Steve Beck. At this time, I don't see a 3-year-old filly, and that would include the winner of the Gazelle, my Miss Sophia. I mean, she got a 93 buyer, and she's a nice filly, but this Untappable has just looked monstrous to me in her 2 wins this year at the Fairgrounds. And keep in mind that the Fairgrounds has been the place where we have seen the Kentucky Oaks winners coming out of in recent years. So that would fit with that same profile that we've been seeing. So again, while I think California Chrome at this point has established himself as clearly the horse to beat in the Kentucky Derby. I think Intampable has established herself as clearly the filly to beat in the Kentucky Oaks.
Yeah, no question about it. I think she's farther ahead in her division than California Chrome is in his division. And let's talk a little bit about that, because last week, you only got about a minute left, but last week I was saying I hope these last 4 preps add some definition to the division. For me, the Wood, not necessarily. The Santa Anita Derby maybe put the California Chrome on everybody's radar. Next week, we'll see Bluegrass and Arkansas Derby. But you're one of the pollsters in the Courier-Journal Kentucky Derby media poll. I looked at your top 20 from this morning's poll, and I see you like the weekend races. California Chrome now on top for you, Wicked Strong second, and I also note you have Cairo Prince third. I have Cairo Prince fifth on my list. I had him 1 going into last week, but with the 4th place finish. But I think that 4th place finish might set him up okay for the Kentucky Derby. Give us some of your thoughts going forward, what we've seen so far over the past couple of weeks.
Well, Wicked Strong I was very high on, and I'll be honest, at this point, he's the one I'm pulling for more than anybody, because I have 100 to win on him at 40 to 1 in the future book that I got like last December, because I really liked Wicked Strong's Remsen. And then he was so disappointing at Gulfstream. But this is another example of those horses that some horses love Gulfstream, like Social Inclusion, and some horses just don't like Gulfstream, like Wicked Strong. That was a strong race by Wicked Strong in the Wood, a 104 buyer. So I think he's the real deal. I think he's a definite contender. Don't forget, his dam is a daughter of Charismatic, who won the Kentucky Derby. And Cairo Prince, I mean, this is one reason I like Cairo, like Wicked Strong, is because Cairo Prince didn't beat him by much, and as did Honor Code. The 3 of them were right together at the end of the Remsen, which is a 1 1/8 race. I thought all 3 of those horses ran well, and of course Honor Code's out of the Derby now. But Cairo Prince, the big problem for him is, will he get a chance to run in the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, absolutely. The points and the horses that are kind of on the bubble are making it very, very interesting. All right, John, we got to wrap things up. But as always, we appreciate the visit. And certainly within the next couple of weeks, we'll be checking in with you, not only online, but we want to get you here on the show as well, because certainly you'll be updating the strike list, which we always like to see who's getting 0 or 1 strikes, because that gives them a better chance than average to win the Kentucky Derby.
And so California Chrome is 0 and Wicked Strong is 1.
Oh, very good, very good. So we know we got some legitimate contenders there, and that'll parse out a little bit more after next week's
final
Social Inclusion,
preps. If he were to run, he'd have 5.
Oh, okay. So he's in a there you go. Very good. All right. John, again, we appreciate the visit. And again, we'll be checking in with you certainly before the Kentucky Derby.
Thanks a lot, Seth. Always good to talk with you.
John White from Santa Anita. A little earlier on, it was my partner Steve Bick talking from New York. He's on his way back after spending the weekend, or Saturday, yesterday, down at Aqueduct for the Wood Memorial and the undercard stakes races. So we'll wrap things up for Loose on the Lead for this Sunday morning. We're here every Sunday from 10 until 11 a.m. Don't forget, if you have questions, comments, or suggestions, looseonthelead@yahoo.com is the email address. We would love to hear from you. Go over and visit the Facebook page, Loose on the Lead. As I said, we're going to wrap things up. And as I mentioned during the middle of the show, don't forget, next Sunday and the Sunday after, Palm Sunday, Easter Sunday, legislatively, there is no betting on racing or viewing of racing or anything here in New York State. I find that completely anachronistic, because you can go into any convenience store over the next couple of Sundays and buy as many lottery tickets as you want. You can go to a local Racino and pull as many slot machine arms as you want. But I've already said that many, many times before. But there will be no programming here on the network next Sunday or the Sunday after. So we'll see you here in 3 Sundays. Enjoy the racing this afternoon. The programming continues on the network, of course, all week long. I'll be back in for the Handicappers Report and Racing Across America tomorrow, Monday morning. But again, enjoy the racing this afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.